This is just a quick response to David Pakman, who today made a video about Reza Aslan, in which he talked about Reza Aslan's qualifications basically being lies for the first like 5 to 10 minutes, and then the rest of the video was just about how he disagreed with Reza Aslan on the substance. Now, this is kind of a weird response because I actually agree with about 80% of this video. I actually think Reza Aslan was mostly wrong on the substance of the things that David Pakman was criticizing. For example, when he said FGM or female genital mutilation was not related to Islam, I don't agree with that. I think obviously a conservative understanding or a conservative interpretation of the Quran is going to potentially lead to FGM because there's nothing in the Quran, as David Pakman correctly points out, that condemns it, and there at times it's kind of encouraged based on certain passages, which is all covered by David Pakman in the video. However, I expressed kind of the disagreement I had about how Mr. Pakman went about this video, and we had a little exchange on Twitter, and it went like this. David Pakman's tweet says, "Can Reza Aslan be trusted? We explore." And everyone's like, "Great vid, I fucking love it, Reza Aslan's a dummy, fuck Reza Aslan, Reza's stupid." And then I kind of come along and I just sort of ruin everything by having a different opinion. I said, "I'm actually with you on the substance, but your attack on his credentials is not convincing. Many commentators have none." Now, I couldn't, because it's Twitter, you know, you can't really add everything. I couldn't point out, well, actually, you know, you're right. When he said he has a PhD in religious studies or in Islam, whatever it was, that's not true. He doesn't have that. I've looked at his credentials, and the credentials as they are put forth by David Pakman, those are accurate. He doesn't have a PhD in religion or whatever. And then I said, "Lol," this is a bit later, "it's funny how you spin Sam Harris's credentials to make it sound remotely religion related. Come on, man." So I was just saying, well, you know, you tried to spin Sam Harris's credentials to sound like they had anything to do with religion. They don't. Like philosophy and neuroscience. However, Mr. Pakman disagreed. How did we spin Sam Harris's credentials? He has a BA in philosophy and PhD in neuroscience. That's what we said. It's true. Now, allow me to play you the part I was laughing at, and you will see that Pakman is wrong. That's not what they said.
Sam Harris, who Aslan frequently criticizes, is a neuroscientist with a background in philosophy who has actually done extensive religious research and fieldwork.
Oh, so look, it turns out there was a little bit more than you just saying that he has qualifications in philosophy and neuroscience. You also said who has actually gone out and done field research and actually knows about these subjects. So you did add a little bit there, and that's what I was criticizing. That's spin. Here's the definition of spin: presentation of information in a particular way, a slant, especially a favorable one. You put a favorable spin on Sam Harris's qualifications. So the reply, he says to me, "How did we spin Sam Harris's credentials? He has a BA in philosophy and a PhD in neuroscience." That's what we said. It's true.
Who has actually done extensive religious research and fieldwork.
That's spin. That's a favorable spin. Now, I mean, you can give me shit about, you know, my criticism of that, but later David said in reply to me, "What credentials did we lie about?" I said, "I'm conceding to you. Reza did lie about what his qualification was. You're right about that, because I think he did lie about it." So in reply to him, I said, "It seems to me like a matter of spin. Reza was wrong or lied about his PhD. Yes, so I'm conceding that. Therefore, has he not studied religion?" David, "We truly have no idea what your argument is." Well, let me explain it in a very simple way. So let's go back to what Reza Aslan's qualifications are. Aslan holds a BA in religious studies from Santa Clara University. A BA in what? In religious studies. A BA in religious studies. Like, how many times do I have to say this? An MTS from Harvard Divinity School. Yeah, I don't know if Harvard Divinity School is a good school, but he's got a master's from Harvard Divinity School, which is a master's in theology. An MFA from the University of Iowa's Writers' Workshop, so that's not necessarily related to religion. A PhD in sociology. That is the one that he lied about or misrepresented about and said he has a PhD in the sociology of religious studies or some shit that he made up. But his dissertation was entitled Global Jihadism as a Transnational Social Movement, a Theoretical Framework. Now, how do you talk about jihadism without even like studying or looking at religion. So based solely on having a BA in religious studies, if what we care about, and apparently based on this conversation, it's what really matters, is people's formal qualifications from an institution, a BA in religious studies would put him miles above Sam Harris. But you span it favorably, like, he's actually done field work. He's actually read a book. Like, Sam Harris sat on the toilet and he read the Quran, and then he went out and did something. But in the meantime, well, you know, I don't like Reza Aslan, and he did lie about his PhD being, like, specifically what he says it was. Therefore, like, a BA in religious studies ain't shit, and a Master's of Theology from Harvard Divinity School ain't shit compared to Sam Harris sitting on the fucking toilet, you know? And the truth be told, I don't actually care to that much of an extent what people's qualifications are. And the second part of this argument is that Reza Aslan cannot be trusted because he lied about his qualifications. And the fact is, I am not a Reza Aslan fan, and I actually think he apologizes too much for religion, and he apologizes too much for the things in the Quran, which is why, on the substance of this whole video, I think that David Pakman has a good point, especially in regards to like female genital mutilation. However, the place where his bias is completely evident is when a guy like Sam Harris comes up, and he's a neuroscientist and he's got a BA in philosophy, and you don't give him shit about the fact that he's like trying to talk about religion, but you give Reza Aslan shit about the fact he's trying to talk about religion, despite the fact Reza Aslan has studied religion. He just hasn't studied the thing he said he did, so he lied about that. So if it's a matter of like the trustworthiness, and I guess that's why you gave it the clickbait title of Reza Aslan cannot be trusted, you know, so you can paint in our mind already that like this guy is shady and dodgy. But the whole thing about qualifications is a total straw man, just like bullshit argument, because you don't give a fuck about Reza Aslan has qualifications. So why do you spend 5 minutes on that? You could just say that he lied about this shit, because the moment you start spinning Sam Harris's qualifications as actually having any fucking relevance to religion is when you completely lose me. What right does Richard Dawkins, who's an evolutionary biologist, what right, and he hasn't read the Quran either, what fucking right does he have to talk about religion? What right does a journalist called Christopher Hitchens have to talk about religion? What right do I have to talk about religion? Unless we have qualifications in the actual subject of like theology or whatever. And that's the thing, you can choose. Do you care about whether somebody has qualifications in theology or don't you? You can't have both. Now, me, personally, I don't actually think you need qualifications in theology. However, you've made a big fucking show about the idea that Reza Aslan is a complete and total fucking liar and a scam and just totally full of shit because he mischaracterizes his qualifications. But when it comes to like other people, like Sam Harris, etc., you don't care if they have qualifications. So why does Reza Aslan have such a higher standard? And I can explain why. It's because you don't like what he's saying, which is perfectly fine, and that's why you had a big substantive disagreement with him later in the video. That's how things are like supposed to go. But this whole like muckraking thing of, okay, we're gonna drag your name through the mud, but we're just gonna have a double standard in regards to other people. Like, that's why these people who like follow the four horsemen of new atheism, they don't have a fucking leg to stand on when it comes to people's qualifications. None of these people are qualified to talk about religion. It's the fact that you like their ideas, you like their characters. Yeah, it's all a character test. That's all it really is. And it's weird because, like I said, when David Pakman talks about the actual issues, I agree with him. But don't tell me you didn't fucking spin Sam Harris positively in a video called "You Can't Trust Reza Aslan because he's dangerous." Like, why is he fucking dangerous? You don't agree with him, and can you please somehow quantify how Reza Aslan's dangerous? I would definitely say, to some degree, Sam Harris's views are more dangerous than Reza Aslan's. But you like Sam Harris, so me saying that is just going to be completely wiped away. Anything I say as to why I think that might be based on his writings, it's just gonna it's not gonna compute. But if I say Reza Aslan's dangerous, whatever, people are just gonna be like, true, you know. When someone says something I don't like, they're dangerous. But when somebody says stuff I like, it's not dangerous at all. Even if other people have the opinion it's dangerous, I just out of hand believe that what they have to say is perfectly A-okay. That is spin, and that's why I felt this whole thing was biased, and I feel like you should just focus on the substance and quit it with the fucking clickbait titles too.
Or out of lack of knowledge. A Bachelor of Arts in Religious Studies out of lack of knowledge. A Master of Theological Studies out of lack of knowledge. Sam Harris, who Aslan frequently criticizes, is a neuroscientist in religious studies with a background in philosophy. A Master of Theological Studies, a neuroscientist with religious studies, background in philosophy, of theological studies, a neuroscientist, religious studies, theological studies, a neuroscientist. Is the point that he's deliberately distorting facts to paint a particular picture that isn't supported in reality? Difficult to say.